Hi gang, welcome back to another podcast. So today we are going to be looking at the Plantations, which is the first chapter in the second year course of junior cycle history. So to start today off, we're going to be talking about the three main groups of people that lived in Ireland in the 1500s. So we had the Old English, who were descended from England and now lived in Ireland. We had the Anglo-Irish, which were English people who had married into Irish families and were now kind of just a mix of both English and Irish. And then we had the Gaelic Irish. The Gaelic Irish spoke Irish, they lived within themselves and they stayed away from the English people. Now, one of the main areas that we should talk about in Ireland is the Pale. So the Pale was Dublin and the surrounding counties of Louth, Meath, Wicklow, and this was where the Old English lived, and it was kind of the main centre for England within Ireland. And because of this meant that it was subject to a lot of raids by the Gaelic Irish. They would come, they would take cows, they would burn the village, and it cost the English a lot of money to repair the damage that the Irish were doing. So this leads us to our reasons for planting. So obviously, they wanted to save money and to stop the raids. As well as that, they wanted to stop rebellions. And then our classic reasons, they wanted to spread their religion, they wanted to spread their laws, and they wanted to get more land and more money. So when we talk about plantations, there are three plantations that we have to know. Now, two of them, you just need to know their names and the result of the plantation, and then one of them you should be able to write a paragraph about. So the first plantation was the Laois Offaly plantation. It was a failure, and the monarch in charge of the Laois Offaly plantation was Queen Mary I. The second plantation is the Munster plantation, and this was also a failure. It was a little bit more successful than the Laois Offaly plantation, but it was still considered a failure. And the monarch in charge of this plantation was Queen Elizabeth I. Our last plantation is the Ulster plantation. Now this is the one I would recommend that you learn and be able to write about. So in the Ulster plantation, it was a success, and we had two monarchs that were in charge of it. We had Queen Elizabeth, and then when she passed away, her godson King James I took over and made the plantation a success. So the plantation happened in 6 of the counties: Donegal, Derry, Tyrone, Armagh, Fermanagh and Cavan. You won't necessarily name them in the exam, but it is important to know Derry, as Derry was one of the main trade counties, and it's a focal point for later chapters when we talk about violence up in Northern Ireland. So when the plantation started, it started with two of the main chiefs up in Northern Ireland, Hugh O'Neill and Hugh O'Donnell, being asked to serve Queen Elizabeth. When they refused, this began a 9-year war from the year of 1594 to 1603. Now, during this 9-year war, there was a lot of fighting up in Northern Ireland and a lot of civil unrest. After they eventually lost the 9-year war, the flight of the Earls happened in 1607. And this then led way to the 1609 plantation, where the 6 counties were planted on, and 3 types of planters were in Northern Ireland. So the first type were undertakers. Undertakers were English people, and they came over from England and they were loyal to the crown. The second type were servitors. Now, servitors fought for the crown during the 9-year war, and as a reward for fighting for the crown, they were given a piece of land. And then last but not least was the loyal Irish. The loyal Irish were Irish people who had either not fought in the 9-year war or had sided with the crown, and as such, they were rewarded by being able to keep some of their own land. Now, when we talk about the plantations, we need to talk about the effects that they had on Ireland, because the effects are still being felt today. So obviously, Protestantism grew. Protestantism was the main religion over in England due to the Reformation. And this meant that the number of Catholics shrank in the country and led to later violence when we look at the Troubles up in Northern Ireland. The Irish language and culture also began to decline, and then you see a revival of this in later years when you look at the chapter on GAA and you look at Padraig Pearse when it comes to the 1916 Rising and speaking Irish. And then we had penal laws. Penal laws were laws against Catholics and any other group that was basically not a Protestant. And these laws stopped you from living your life to the fullest. So it meant that Catholics couldn't vote, they couldn't own weapons, they couldn't attend Mass, they couldn't attend schools, they had to go to Protestant Mass, and one of the most random ones was they were not able to own a horse of good quality, which meant that they weren't able to own a horse that would be able to help them farm or be able to travel so far from their house. So these were the major effects that happened in Ireland, and it led to later chapters which we will look at, such as the 1916 Rising, the 1798 Rebellion, and other chapters. Okay guys, that is the Plantations over and done in under 6 minutes. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you in another podcast. Bye!